All right, YouTube. All right, YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. Doing a CarCast real quick, talking about Auburn football. And, man, tomorrow is a huge day for the Auburn Tigers. Go ahead and smash that like button. Also, the subscribe button, man. Y'all been pouring it in the last few days. I really appreciate it. Go ahead, like I said before, like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. Now, Auburn's athletics is at literally two ends of the spectrum, at least from a public perception standpoint. Number one, you got the basketball team, really, truly the best team in the country from what I've seen of their abilities to pretty much match up with any team, their abilities to outman any team. I think this team is legit, for sure. And it has taken Bruce Pearl some years to piece together the right combination as far as what he wants to accomplish on the hard court, and he has done an excellent job. Probably has arguably the best front court in the country, and I'm really intrigued by what this team will do moving forward. Got great point guards. These guys can shoot. The big men can shoot. They play good on defense. They rebound well. They create anxiety to force turnovers. So I think this Auburn basketball team might be on to something. Then you got some of the more, non-popular sports that are starting to turn it on, like your gymnastics team and hockey. Hell, I didn't even know Auburn had a hockey team. And the women's basketball team, I'm not going to say that's a non-popular sport because, Auburn traditionally has a pretty good women's basketball team. As a matter of fact, big shout out to Tasha Hamilton, who I knew very well, who played college basketball at Auburn, women's basketball at Auburn, and also I was at this particular game when Auburn had the opportunity to beat Pat Summitt. I thought that was one of the more memorable Auburn women's basketball games that I'd actually attended. That was back in the old Beard Eves Memorial Coliseum. Now, then on the other hand, you have Auburn football to where you hear the fans tell it. It is a dumpster fire. Now the word dumpster fire kind of came in the early portion of the 2010s, like around your 2012, 2013, 14, around that era where you had coaches like Brett Bielema, and you had the coach from Tennessee. I can't think of his name right now. But those teams totally tanked it. They were absolutely terrible. Now, they did bad. They had horrible results. And those coaches eventually were vacated. And now you have a situation where Arkansas is a very respectable team in the SEC West right now. A couple of balls bounced their way. They could have been in the conversation. Tennessee is not quite as dumpster fire-ish as they were when all this dumpster fire talk was happening. But nonetheless, that word has seemed to stick with the fan bases of each of these universities when it comes to as far as dumpster fires, teams that are so horrible that they can't recover and things of that nature. So it's just unfortunate that Brian Harsin is in the middle of a situation where no one really knew who he was. They're not really respecting the whole Boise State thing, and it's just been really difficult for him to establish some type of ground, especially when, you talk about how he came on verbally and talked about how we're going to play hard-nosed football, we're going to win, we're going to, he made a lot of promises to the Auburn fan base coming into the season. And a lot of it showed up on the field. I'm not going to play around with you all on this. A lot of it did show up on the field. I think Auburn might have been maybe, a few plays away. You take away a few plays at some really critical times, And you're probably talking about a totally different outcome this season. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to windmill for Brian Harsin. I'm not going to sunshine punt Brian Harsin because the results are what they are. My thing from a personal standpoint, I've watched a lot of college football. I've watched a lot of football, and I've actually played football before, and have always prided myself on being a student of the game as far as, film study and kind of analyzing the tendencies of other teams and kind of how you have to break down the game within the game to be successful against a particular team. As a matter of fact, I remember covering LSU and Auburn back in 2019, and I watched video and I watched the trend stat wise with Joe Burrow and how he was able to pretty much outclass every team in college football, but he wasn't able to do it against Auburn because of all the things that I had aforementioned in videos before that game came out. I said that, Joe Burrow averaging about 12 yards per pass. I think they need to, it's all in crunching the numbers down. You have to make it harder for him to get to his result. If he's got 12 yards per pass, he's going to beat you, period. But Auburn was able to condense that thing down to where the defense put Auburn in a position to win that football game. The offense was pretty anemic in that one. But either way, those are the kind of things that I like to do here on this channel, like to dissect the game within the game. But either way, got a little bit off track. Each game that I watched this year, it was actually the first time I could actually, and this is just based on a football quality, physicality, stuff making sense. It was the first time I could actually watch Auburn football in a long time without looking at the game and saying, like, what the F am I looking at? Especially even on offense where, there were some challenges. I think we're discounting Bo Nix's injury. I think we really are, because Bo Nix was the solution for the offensive line situation. Bo Nix was really starting to reach his stride around the time that he broke his ankle. But I really saw some okay football. I saw some football that was bearable to watch. The only problem is I could always see trends, though, in Brian Harsin's team to where there are opportunities to put the game away, but the play calling lapses a little bit. Let's just say you get a big stop on the defense. You're up 14-7 or somewhere around there. Or you're up 21-7. You get a big stop on the defense. You get the ball in plus territory, but you go 3 and out. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. Things that allow teams to just kind of ease in the game, kind of stay in the game, and then it comes back to bite you when you don't take advantage of those things at that time. Especially when you're talking about playing against conference teams and their ability to score really quickly. And you look at even the Mississippi State game. I mean, offense gets off to a great start and then just sputters in the second half. Yeah, the defense did collapse, but the offense did not sustain enough to win that game. I'm not going to blame the offense. I'm not going to blame the defense, but as a collection, just wasn't able to sustain in that game. Now, let's get over to this whole recruiting thing. Brian Harsin actually on the social hot seat. I don't think he's on the Auburn hot seat, but definitely on the social hot seat. You guys are mad as a hornet at Brian Harsin out of Boise State. Went 69-19 while he was out there. Has had a respectable career up to this point. 6-7 in his first year at Auburn, losing 5 straight to end the season. Definitely not a popular look among the demanding Auburn fan base. My question, though, This isn't the premise of this video, but my question though is, does Auburn fans have the we're just talking about stats. We're just talking about stats, and I'm an Auburn fan and alumnus myself, and I want to think that I can kind of halfway analyze the game a little bit. But with all that stuff involved, does Auburn really have the, with all the comments that I get in the comment section, Auburn is a dumpster fire, Brian Harsin should, all this other stuff. Does Auburn have grounds to do this? To not give a coach a chance? To, let's just say, not only give a coach a chance to, I'm not saying give the coach a chance to do anything but succeed or fail. Because none of us have really the rightful place to determine whether the coach will succeed or fail anyway. And you also don't know by which parameters he's being judged. You don't know what's on the performance plan. Hey, coach, this year you got to win 8 games. The ones you do lose have to be, respectable. We got to see signs that, certain things are happening. And as a bonus, you got to beat one of 2 of your rivals. Just for shits and giggles. I don't know if that's the case. But I'm not understanding the fan base though. I'm like, I'm talking about the ones that really talk the crazy stuff. What if, by some strange stretch, the same judgmental approach that you have with Brian Harsin, what if your company rolled like that? Oh, your first 6 months with the company, you weren't able to win us let's just say whatever the national championship of, whatever the national championship is with this company. You weren't able to win us the national championship in your first 6 months working here as a manager. I think we need to start looking elsewhere. I mean, where does that make sense? Outside of all the coordinators leaving, all that other stuff, where does that make sense? It just doesn't. It doesn't. Absolutely does not make sense. Also, considering had a lot of transfer. You know what? I don't even want to talk about this shit no more. I want to get into the meat of this video, which is talking about recruiting. All right, so we're going to talk about recruiting. Auburn has a big day tomorrow, which I don't think there's going to be like some huge noise unless Brian Harsin has some stuff up his sleeve, kind of like what he had during the early signing period. So what does Auburn need? Well, definitely need some offensive linemen for sure. Got one in the early signing period. And, it's been kind of shaky ever since. Got Eston Harris Jr. out of Auburn, Alabama. Actually went to Beauregard first, but then transferred over about 15, 20 miles over to Auburn High School to get him some more exposure. That is my assumption. I don't know that to be true. However, that's the offensive lineman in the class so far. Auburn needs about 2 or 3 more. Now, the good news is, and what a lot of people are not talking about, is the fact that Auburn was able to retain a great portion of their offensive line from this past year, which is going to pay dividends for them this fall, especially considering the experience and the injury factor. All of those different things are going to really help them. It's really going to help Auburn to be successful. So what do we got? Auburn doesn't necessarily need another running back. However, it would be a nice gain to challenge the running back room. And I'm talking about Trevante Citizen. Trevante Citizen seemed to be trending towards Auburn. Seemed to kind of like Auburn a little bit coming out of Louisiana. However, the trajectory has changed as LSU has started to put a little more heat on. Chip Kelly's arrival at LSU probably changed the trajectory there. You know, obviously you have a leader that comes from a team that has made the college football playoff, you know, for a couple of years. And you're like, hey, you know, the home state might be on to something. Okay. And you also have, Florida now makes sense for Trevante Citizen because Billy Napier, who was the coach in Louisiana, could have possibly had some ties with Trevante Citizen and like, hey, you know, taking my show to Florida. Florida's despite what has been going on, Florida's still obviously a good place to play football. So Trevante Citizen might have jumped on that train and say, hey, you know, maybe I need to look there. And also Auburn in the situation with Cadillac Williams as the running back coach and Tank Bigsby at the heels of a 1,000-yard year. And also you have Jarquez Hunter, who no one really knew about, who burst on the scene nationally and really made a name for himself. So Trevante Citizen has a really difficult decision to make because I think he could be successful at any one of the schools. I think he could really have some success at any one. So it's going to be a real toss-up as to whether Auburn can pull this off. I would be shocked. I will say this. I would be shocked if he decides to come to Auburn. My guess is he winds up at LSU. I really think the Chip Kelly thing has turned Trevante Citizen's love around to where he's like, maybe things aren't so bad at the house. All right, so we're still doing the CarCast. Go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger. We're talking about Auburn recruiting here on Vernon Speaks Sports tonight. Go ahead and leave in the comment section who you think should be the biggest target for the Tigers going into tomorrow. And considering all the public perception, does Auburn even have a chance to land these particular guys? Because sometimes wishing doom and gloom or projecting doom and gloom, you wind up getting it. Appreciate that, Auburn fans. Some of you, not all of you, War Eagle. All right, so going on down the list. Now, here's the one. Here is the one that's going to be interesting. Now, Caden Story out of Lynette, Alabama. He was recruited by Nick Eason and the staff at the time. Now, here's the deal. None of those guys are there anymore. Derek Mason is gone. Derek Mason is I think, the one who gave Auburn any iceberg's chance in hell of a chance to land this guy, him being the last guy left. But I think Nick Eason obviously had the most impact. Kind of saw what Nick Eason was able to do with the defensive line this year. The guys were actually pretty good. Derek Hall, Kobe Wooten, those guys were pretty impactful. And Mason, you know, were pretty nationally notorious in some conversations of sports analysts when Auburn would play games on TV. Nick Eason's departure, I think, put the nail in the coffin for Auburn in this game. And I think that, you know, Caden Story probably caught wind of Nick Eason leaving, and this was probably going to happen anyway, because, you know, people usually know when they're about to roll out. So I think Caden Story 100% makes sense. It makes sense from a relationship standpoint for Caden Story, who is a huge Auburn target, to land at Clemson. It only makes sense. Only makes sense because, I mean, you haven't had time to establish a relationship with Jimmy Brumbaugh at this point. It just, to me, even as bad as I would want Caden Story to come to Auburn, it just doesn't make sense. All right, so as far as the offensive line, this guy's trending towards Alabama, but this will be a huge gain for the Tigers. And that's Riley Quick out of Hewitt Trustville. Would be a huge gain. I'm talking about Auburn needs not only offensive linemen, but Auburn needs quality depth at the offensive line because of how these guys are being utilized. There's always one key injury, which happened last year, which, you know, Nick Brahms, which happened last year, which was a contributing factor as to why things, you know, really didn't get going late in the season offensively. Got to have this guy. Now, will they get him? You know, it's showing on the list that he's about five. It's actually a medium chance of him going to Alabama right now. So we will see tomorrow how he lands, or if he lands at Auburn. Would be a huge gain for the Tigers. All right, guys, go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. Also, let me know in the comment section who you think, or what position group, obviously, has to be successful tomorrow. And also, Auburn fans, remember, social media is a thing. Everybody can see it. So be careful to not shoot yourself in the foot. Don't cut your nose off to spite your face. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger. War Eagle.